Hey everyone, I'm Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I am so excited to be here today with Laura Moss, the director and co-writer of Birth, Rebirth. Hello, Laura. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited that Birth, Rebirth is finally coming to the world. I saw it at Sundance and haven't been able to stop thinking about it. So it must be even more exciting for you to have it kind of unleashing your own Frankenstein's monster, as it were, into the world.
It is. I mean, it's really a dream come true. I mean, Sundance was an amazing place to premiere, and then the fact that we were picked up for a theatrical release is kind of beyond my wildest dreams for the movie. So it's been great.
So, okay, I would love to hear about the process of writing this movie and where your love for maybe Frankenstein or Victorian, like what part of Frankenstein that you gravitated towards and wanted to kind of use to create your own version of perhaps again an easy comparison of Frankenstein type story.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I read Frankenstein in school,
Yeah.
and it was one of the several books at the time that were presented to me as, literature by women.
Yeah.
So before that, there, was some Jane Austen and some Bronte sisters. And frankly, I couldn't really relate to that kind of writing, like especially sort of novels about romance and marriage and manners were just not my jam. So when I read Frankenstein and found out that this young woman wrote it really blew my mind. And I was pretty obsessed with the novel.
Mary Shelley is everything to me, just as a side.
Yeah, I mean, I became kind of obsessed with her and this idea of Victor Frankenstein as a woman, and that was sort of the seed that didn't leave my mind. What would it mean if you wanted to do something with your brain but you needed to reckon with your body in order to do it? Was kind of the question for me. Maybe because it's an epistolary novel, it begins with these letters. The germ of this idea started as journal entries that I was writing in the form of letters. And they were letters from prison,
Oh,
Rose's perspective, to the mother of this child she reanimated. And in this version of the story, Rose was caught, imprisoned, and the mother, who didn't know her child was alive, was suddenly given this severely handicapped child to care for. And Rose was explaining and kind of justifying what she had done. So that was,
whoa.
I shared that with my writing partner, who was my husband at the time, and said, what is this? And he was like, I don't know, but I've never
Help.
seen anything like it. And then it took us like another sort of decade to really translate it into a film. But
Oh my God. So you've worked on this for a long time. Like this has been an idea
I
for a
mean,
while.
I wouldn't say I've been working on it that long, because it definitely kind of kept coming in and out of a desk drawer. But I do think, basically, Brendan, my writing partner, and I had another feature that we'd written that as far as we were concerned, was ready to go, and it was pretty large in scope. It's what we're
Okay.
hoping to make next, and we were told by basically the whole film industry that we weren't going to have that be our first feature. That getting the financing for something that big was, impossible. And so really it was back to the drawing board, and we looked at each other and said, what can we make that's contained, that we're really passionate about, but also sort of a contained story that takes
Yeah.
place with just a few characters in just a few locations. And this, half-formed Frankenstein idea kept coming back. So that's really
That's so
the
cool.
evolution, the long story of the evolution of this.
Well, that's amazing. I love that it's like letters to the that like it's just really cool how that evolved into that. And
I mean, it did, yeah, it was surprising to me that it didn't end up in the story, because it's a rich idea, just like that tension. But as we were writing it was just more interesting to us to figure out how they would cooperate and form a bond, and not be so adversarial.
well, and that's what I love about this movie and how you like have this like weird alliance. Like it's not really a friendship, but they don't hate each other. And it's this like tentative bond. And we don't see a lot of women getting those kinds of roles. I feel like you were working with tropes, but you're breaking them. Like you have the tired single mom and the isolated scientist, but you're breaking them in a really interesting way and creating intimacy between women in a platonic-ish way that I really love to see. Because again, you don't see that a lot with like female friends and female characters, especially in horror. So it's like really refreshing to see that on screen with this movie.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think in previous drafts they were more adversarial, and
Yeah.
as I mentioned, it was just more interesting to me to figure out the ways in which they were alike rather than the ways in which they were different, or the ways they complemented each
Yeah.
other. Um, I think in many ways Rose represents this obsession with career and legacy,
Oh
and
yeah.
really represents sort of identifying your sense of self with motherhood. Although, of course, she has her own career as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to explore, I think I was in my late 30s when we really sat down to write this movie, and it just did feel like that question of balancing career and children, choosing to have a child or not, or having that choice made for you. It was kind of in the ether for me that, all of my friends were going through some iteration of that question, as was I. So the idea that like there's this fork in the road and that these two women are so different, I wanted to explore how, their needs, their wants, and
Yeah.
ultimately their lives actually had a lot of overlap, a lot of similarities.
And I love that, just because as someone who is not really looking, like wanting to be a mom, but still interested in like how that's on screen and horror, again, I feel like we're entering an era where we're looking at birth and motherhood with way more nuance. It's not just you're a mom or you're not a mom. And again, this movie, like you just said, it reminds me of a little bit of Dead Ringers, a little bit the new show with Rachel Weisz, and like the way tackling bodily autonomy. And I love Rose's character and how you see her impregnating herself for all, and like playing with this idea of, especially now, like kind of abortion and stem cells. And I love that you play with that, especially with her using her own body as a site for science and as a site for not the usual motherhood you think of. And I want to know when that came into the script and where that came from for you, and Rose using her own body as part of this whole experiment.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because even though there aren't really explicit queer themes in the movie, I think there's a lot of implicit stuff, and
Oh yeah.
a lot of
Oh,
backstory
thank
that I
you. That
discussed with.
makes me, I was like, I'm not just because there's two women. It's not queer because of that, but there's
No,
Rose
no.
is queer though in my head.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's in my mind, and what we discussed with the actors, Rose is ace, and Celie is queer, is a lesbian, in fact. But like, I think that and of course that's just my take on it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way.
I still love
But
that though.
I think for me, I'm non-binary, and I think a lot of stuff that I don't even think I was conscious of that's present in the script. There are a lot of themes about wrestling with one's own body, like
Yeah.
your body not behaving the way that you would like it to, your inability to sort of control your body, and the ultimate sort of limitations of the body,
Yeah.
and specifically what it means to have a uterus. And so, yeah, I think that's all in there. And I like to take credit for things, but I honestly usually end up like thinking about it after the fact and going, maybe I was dealing with that while when I was making this movie.
Subconsciously dealing with during
Yeah,
this
yeah,
time.
yeah, exactly.
I love that. Well, and so you have also an incredible cast in this. Like Marin Ireland is one of my favorites, but also Judy Reyes. Like the two of
Yeah,
them
yeah.
together, like in your first feature. Like what was that like to get to direct the two of them together and separately? Because they're just like forces of nature in everything.
I mean, it's so cool. They both have these really rich, storied careers already. And, I would say that both Marin's background in the theater and Judy's background in television probably informed their like tremendous stamina. We were an indie film shooting on an indie schedule, packing our days full of these highly emotional scenes.
Yeah. How
And
many
they were
days did you
just
have, by the way? Did you have?
24.
Okay.
And they were so able to deliver. I mean, they were just always present, always prepared. And so, I think when you're starting out as a filmmaker, very often you're working with less experienced actors, and so you're a director but sometimes an acting teacher, or that's how it feels, like you're you're helping an
Yeah.
actor discover their process and their style. And the joy of working with experienced actors like Judy and Marin is you're just a director, that they bring so much to the roles and so much nuance that really it feels like playing on easy, I think, when you're directing them.
That's gotta be so nice.
They really
You're like,
found the
just
characters
go
in each
forth.
other.
Just I'll watch you
Yeah,
work and I'll say
just
good job or like change a couple things, but you're like, thanks for making my job way easier.
they were amazing, and they were both amazing with AJ, with our little girl. I think just their ability to work with her with such empathy and care, really made the whole process extra special.
That's amazing. And also, what was it like to direct a pig?
Oh, terrible. It was terrible to direct
Terrible?
a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pig.
I figured it was. I was like, what was that in an apartment? Like, I mean, that
Yeah.
must have been like quite an adventure to put it.
Yeah, in my mind, when we wrote this, we wrote it with a teacup pig in mind, because we'd never met a teacup pig, because teacup pigs aren't real. It was just something we discovered in prep, that teacup pigs are just baby pigs, and then they grow to be very large, unless by some fluke they don't. And the thing about baby pigs is they really won't take direction. So we couldn't. This was the smallest light. This was a 45-pounder, and Anjali was 50 pounds lighter than the second smallest pig that we could find. So, she was it. And through this, her owners and trainers were phenomenal. And I mean, by pig standards, she was Meryl Streep, but she's a pig.
Still a
And
pig.
and I definitely found myself sort of cursing out the writers of this film, going like, you put a kid and a pig in your first movie? Who wrote this? Oh, it was me.
Damn
Yeah.
it. I did this. Well, shit. Incredible. Well, so have you always been a fan of horror? Like, did you grow up watching horror, or is it a newer thing for you?
I grew up watching horror. I'm the oldest of four, and we were,
Okay.
left to our own devices at Kim's Video and Blockbuster a lot as kids. And so I saw many movies far too young, and they made like deep imprints on my brain. So yeah, I've always loved horror. And I think, for me, it was also about giving voice to things that adults weren't talking about. It just,
Yeah.
it felt sort of more alive and more important than I feel like all the other genres of films that I watched as a
Yeah.
kid.
Well, what were some that left deep imprints on your brain then? I'm curious.
Well, the very first one that I remember sort of having an image that I couldn't shake isn't, I guess, technically horror. It was Beetlejuice. It was the Lost
Okay.
Souls room in Beetlejuice where the
Yes.
spirits are. I just like obsessed over that philosophical concept for a really long time. I watched Frankenhooker really young. I chose it because the
Hell
box
yeah.
was rated, so I loved that movie. And Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is probably the first movie that like scared the living daylights out of me. And I'm a fan. I really believe that kids should watch things young, but I think I saw that way too young.
How old were you when you saw that?
I was like 12. I was like
Oh my
really
God.
yeah, too young.
Wow. I love that, but oh my God, like we are
Yeah.
like us horror fans are like, I mean, I act like I didn't watch like Human Centipede at 13 or anything
There you
weird
go.
like that. So we're all just weird and wild. But
Dr. Giggles too, the speech
Giggles,
that he
yes.
gives about the braces, because I had braces at the time,
No.
is also burned into my brain.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today about Birth Rebirth. I'm so excited for everyone to see it. It is hitting theaters soon, everybody, so please check it out. And again, Laura, thank you so much for chatting with me about this film.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.